Hi there. This is my reaction review breaking down and analyzing House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 1, A Son for a Son. And like I did back in Season 1, the way I'm going to handle this is I'm going to go over the top 7 most notable things about the episode. A checklist of 7 things, could be good or bad, just the 7 highlights of it. Because 7 is a good number. And to get it out quicker, I'm going to do these as audio-only podcasts, and I'm sorry I'm getting this out by Thursday, but there was enough discussion about slight changes to Blood and Cheese that I wanted to see what everyone else was saying first. I wanted to get a sense of all the book fan channels of how did people feel about this. I think it was worth waiting a day or two to survey what everyone else was saying. So, diving right in, point 1, Blood and Cheese. There were some slight changes, but I loved this. I mean, the cinematography, the music, the acting, the overall directing felt like real cinema. And there were some slight changes from the books, and a few people are yelling online that were yelling that they were angry, but not major book fan channels. That's why I waited to check that generally everyone had the same reaction. Even like Westeros.org with Elio and Linda, who worked on the companion books, that they were also okay with it. That the reaction everyone generally had was, oh, this is pretty good, could have been great, but maybe we shouldn't have done the full-on book version, and we're okay with that. Red Team Review, though, mentioned that he made a reaction video that he saw a handful of people, like the day or two after it on social media, not major channels, but just randos, going, oh, Benioff and Weiss would have done this better. I don't even think they did the Red Wedding well, in terms of suspense and the cinematography and pacing of how the book did it. It leaned into empty spectacle and gore porn. I mean, when the big memorable thing for people is, oh no, this is better than the book, because this added a pregnant woman getting stabbed in the stomach. That isn't pacing, editing, cinematography, music, the art of cinema. You just added gore. That's just violence. In contrast, in the behind-the-scenes videos, Alan Taylor directly stated we were modeling this on old noir horror films. He compared, the slow build-up of them coming through the sewers to the sewer scene from The Third Man with Orson Welles. That they were citing classic cinema for this, and they'd say, yeah, we spend 10 minutes from their POV. Well, it's like a horror movie where you see, why wasn't it from Helena's perspective? Well, it's more horrible. What the hell are they going to do? What the hell are they going to do? And it was supposed to be a surprise that at the end, oh no, it's Helena. For how they did that, it's, oh no, Michael Myers is standing behind the door, run, and you're shouting at the screen, and in the end, they don't hear you. I thought that worked. And I understood that he's citing these other horror movies from, the 40s and stuff, of the slow build of that. And just looking at, the thing that stood out to me was the music. Just Ramin Djawadi really nailed it. They had this racing heartbeat soundtrack to it, of just the tension and rising, and oh no, a handmaid sauce, we have to hurry, was done really well. And I know there are a few people, and I am going to split off a separate video talking about this in more detail. I can't spend more than 5 minutes on it. A few people do legitimately say, well, we wanted to have Helena make this impossible choice that drives her insane and stuff. I don't think that would have worked. I have friends and family members who threatened to stop watching the show over this. They felt it was so dark, who hadn't read the book, and I was saying, no, it was toned down from the book version. They're like, then I definitely would have stopped watching if they had done that. So, for a general audience, maybe it's a better idea to tone it down a little. And a couple of other structural reasons I'll go over, of stuff that's going to come up in the future, that I thought, that's why I took a couple of days to watch blind reaction videos from not book reader channels. They were so rattled by this. I don't think we could have gotten away with more. And even the book fan channels are going pretty much the same thing. That it was handled very deftly with good cinematography. If you think, oh no, I was hyping this up as gore on camera, no, they're supposed to leave it off camera. And clickbait channels have been hyping this up for 2 years as House of the Dragon's Red Wedding, the next Red Wedding. And I've seen other channels, thankfully, Red Team Review, Gray Area, others, acknowledging this isn't comparable to the Red Wedding, because the point is it's a plot twist. Like Ned Stark's death wasn't gory, it's a plot twist. That they're killing off an established character versus even in Fire and Blood. I mean, there's no way you could really build up Jaehaerys as a character. That it isn't killing off a long-running POV character, it's simply not the same thing. And best of both worlds, really, because now, what are the clickbait channels going to talk about? That they constantly, I've seen them like as a non sequitur, when they run out of other things to talk about, but remember, Blood and Cheese is coming, it's going to be awesome, it's going to be gore. Now what are you going to do? That it was handled deftly and with finesse and cinematography. What are they going to try to hype people up with? This is a relic of that hype fandom from late Game of Thrones, when anyone treating it as real cinema was gone, and oh no, this is such action, it's empty spectacle. And that's not going to come back. That this is a Game of Thrones director, Alan Taylor, without Benioff and Weiss constantly, micromanaging him, was free to use real cinema in this, and in the performance and everything. And for people going, oh, we wanted Helena to be screaming, that's histrionics. If anything, I've seen the real, not just randos on social media, but real analysis channels and news outlets going, wow, look at Fia Saban's amazing performance. That's what people act like in a moment of a home invasion or crisis or shock. They're not running around screaming to show off, oh, look, I'm shouting. That's not what acting is. It was a really good performance. So everything about it was very deftly handled, and in terms of story things going forward, I'm interested in TV Helena. Yeah, it's different from the books, but I like it, and even the hardcore book fans like Westeros.org are pretty much on board with this. So I'm just saying it's there, and it was well done. Was it my favorite? Well, child death isn't exactly something I'd say is a favorite standout moment, but it was well done. So I'm okay with that and don't consider it a negative. Moving on, Kragan Stark and the North. The general reaction I've seen for the episode praised nearly all of it, start to finish. There were no weak spots, except for disagreement about the first and last scenes. And even then, broadly, most people generally thought Blood and Cheese was well done. That for what they were trying to do, they consciously said, we're going to tone it down a bit, but in terms of refinement, that the cinematography, acting, all of that wasn't really a problem. Of course, people are upset about it, but the one outright weak spot of the episode, not even Blood and Cheese, and I've seen this across multiple channels, is Kragan, the North, and the prologue. And even then, it's not criticizing. The reaction is just, this is a decent 5-minute prologue scene, but we thought we were getting a multi-episode subplot. And like they're saying, oh, Winterfell is in it. Winterfell isn't in it. It's shown in montage. Jace and Kragan aren't even there. We barely see that. So for what they were trying to do, it was brief but pleasant fan service. Don't get me wrong. And Ryan Condal openly refers to it as fan service, using that term in the behind-the-scenes videos. But they could have done much more with it, and we'll see what they're doing later. I am splitting off a longer video about this, that it merits its own dedicated discussion, so check that out right after this. Moving on, point 3 out of 7. Allison and Kristen Cole. Alicole, as they say. This wasn't in the books, and when we first heard they were doing it like a week or two ago when the advanced reviews came out, we were a little surprised, but I was generally fine with it, and book channels I've surveyed since then were also pretty much fine with it. Again, even Westeros.org wasn't really complaining. It helps that they clarified their reasoning for it in advance, that they explained in advance. Liv Cook and Fabian pretty much said, yes, they're going to be doing stuff, having sex, and why they're doing it. That, yeah, I can understand your reasoning here, that logically, Allison is really repressed because she was married off at 15 to a man old enough to be her father, and she never really got to be a young woman, and her arc this season is that she's losing power and significance. That you saw at the Small Council, that her whole mission in life for 20 years was to produce a male heir and get him crowned king. And now that he's on the throne, she's irrelevant. They're ignoring her. So she's under a lot of stress from losing power, from, oh my god, Aemon killed Luke. And bizarrely, everyone cares so little about her anymore that they don't even care what she does, to the point that she's having sex with Kristen. It's not really a backlash anymore. So they're presenting her as a flawed, three-dimensional character with feelings. She has emotions. This lonely character feeling control slipping away, and paradoxically the freedom that brings that she hasn't had in 20 years as a glorified broodmare. But wait, what made it really work for me is they made it clear in the actual execution of it, that they make it clear this is her experimenting around due to stress and loneliness. That this isn't some big new relationship, that she feels guilty about it and conflicted, that they have her say, being awkward and saying, we can't again, but then does, that she's in conflict with herself. So, fine, as a complex, flawed character, and I'm feeling emotions now, and that it works. It functions, it doesn't detract from anything. And I generally saw that from other book channels as well, that I wouldn't have done this if I was writing it, and I could do without it, but I don't hate it. And they're not really hyping it up as a ship, it's just Allison is behaving self-destructive a little, and it makes internal sense on its own terms, in terms of characterization and stuff, and Liv Cook was fine with it, and it wasn't done gratuitously or anything. With like lots of full frontal nudity and everything. So I was fine with it. I hope they don't overemphasize it too much in later episodes. I don't think they will. Just moving forward, if she's acting out because of everything. So when we first heard of this, people said, "Oh no, it's going to break the internet." I'm like, it makes internal sense. I don't really have a problem with it. And it was well executed in terms of the acting and stuff, and just their characters with feelings. 0.4 out of 7. Aegon II, Tongling Carney, nothing but praise in terms of the writing and the performance. This is what we came for. That, as many other reviewers have already cited, I can't really add more to it, that it's great they're fleshing him out as a three-dimensional character. That he isn't this mustache-twirling villain, that he's a flawed person and a product of his upbringing, but I'm really looking forward to what Tongling Carney's doing this whole season, that this is a key feature of George R. R. Martin's writing. Not black and white heroes and villains, but shades of gray. I mean, Aegon's a spoiled brat and kind of a dude bro, but he's not outright malicious. The product of his upbringing, that Ryan Condal said word for word in interviews, behind-the-scenes videos more than once, he is not Joffrey 2.0. If you thought we were making a carbon copy of Joffrey, because he wasn't in Season 1 that much because of the time skips, he's only in 2 episodes in Season 1. No, he is not a malicious monster. I mean, he does bad things, but I wouldn't even call him a villain. It's just, you can see, well, he wasn't really raised well. I mean, his elderly father was barely there. His mother was practically a kid herself, and they spoiled him, but there is love in his heart. That you see he genuinely loves his son. He might not be a responsible father. They're bonding over messing with Thailand, but, he smiles at him and is being nice, and he loves his son. And a big thing that Condal stressed in behind-the-scenes videos is, this is him being nice to Jaehaerys, bringing him to the Small Council. He said, well, he'll rule one day himself. I want him to be prepared. That Condal said, He resents that Viserys never brought him to the small council and trained him to rule. And he knows, I don't know what I'm doing specifically because Viserys never trained me, and he feels bad about it. So he wants better for his own son. He wants to treat him better than his father did, who ignored him. So in terms of, this is everything we came for. I feel silly that I can't add more to it. That Grey character, the performance lived up to the writing and the source material. This is what Fire and Blood was in my head. I am watching on screen. This is what I hoped it would be. And even though, I'm Team Rhaenyra and stuff, that these aren't just, cartoony villains. They're just people they have a rivalry with. So, nothing more I can add, just all around great. This is classic George R.R. Martin stuff, and we're seeing it on screen again. And for a while I thought there were actually some of the, many of the recapper people who are currently in charge of things are the people who came to power during late Game of Thrones, and most reviews are praising this, but the few who are going, I miss having clear heroes where I knew who to root for, that's not what Martin and Game of Thrones were or should have been about, what A Song of Ice and Fire should have been about. The whole point was the Lannisters, you think they're villains, but Tyrion and Jaime are actually, in their own way, sympathetic characters, that the Grey writing of Martin that got thrown out for Jon Snow making hero poses fighting ice zombies, and there aren't two sides as three-dimensional characters. People forgot that with all the blind action of just hacking zombies in the later seasons. And it's weird how you're seeing these advanced reviews going, I was so conflicted that these are flawed, nuanced characters on the green side. And meanwhile, I'm going, we're back, baby. This is what we wanted. And they can have a problem. We don't need them. They can go away. That this is back to what the early book-accurate seasons of Game of Thrones were like, what we wanted out of all of this. 0.5 out of 7. Emma Darcy's performance through body language when Rhaenyra returns from Storm's End. I mean, the whole walk, from landing and only ending with, I want Aemond Targaryen. Now, clickbaiters and hypers will, of course, just, focus on, oh my god, look at their face in the final shot when they say, I want Aemond. The whole sequence is longer than that. That's only the very end of it. And just the acting and cinematography are amazing, and the exact opposite of what Benioff and Weiss would have done, which is show off these performances, these faces, in a tight close-up. Showing Emma's, mentally picture, tight close-up, the top and bottom of the frame are chin and hairline on Emma Darcy for like a full 30 seconds to a full minute of just Emma making a crying face and showing off, oh, look how much acting is. That isn't acting, that is pantomime. I'm going to split this off into a longer video because it merits it, but just how much Emma conveyed shock through body language, that during that walk, for most of it, Rhaenyra, she is not facing the camera. That it's from behind, but you see just how much her body language has changed. That she is walking stiffly and robotically as if in a haze. This isn't how Rhaenyra normally walks. And just, you could see it. I mean, go back and rewatch it if you weren't paying as much attention. Just the real physicality of that was mind-blowing. And the way they filmed it, I've seen other videos pointing out, you don't pay attention to, the camera work on this, that they were following, again, it's not a static shot of the faces, they were following Emma with steady cams. But then the camera zooms in over the table in such a way that I saw some other video pointing out, when the camera shifts behind Daemon, they use that as a cheat to shift between a Steadicam shot and a crane shot. Because in behind-the-scenes videos, we see they were pushing a crane camera over the table to get this dolly shot. So everything was on point. This is complex camera work, but the acting that wasn't showing off the faces, but theater actors, Emma's a theater actor, and like praised before, the House of the Dragon used theater actors who act with their whole body, because theater can't have close-ups. Amazing. Which of the two performances did I like more, her or Tom? They're not comparable. It's quality versus quantity. That it's this one mind-blowingly good acting scene by Emma with one line of dialogue versus many scenes of Tom giving a very nuanced performance about this very flawed but not evil character. Both good in their own way. So that he had more scenes and had more to play around with, less intense because he's not dealing with, oh my god, I just found that Luke's tattered cloak, he's dead. We will see more of Tom in later episodes, of course, but all around great. I'm going to make longer videos about how the cinematography and the body language acting works. Maybe not this week, but I'm getting around to it. The last 2 points in my list of 7 things are not character-based, though, but story elements, and they're 6 and 7 are related in this list. Point 6, they are showing the suffering of the small folk. And point 7, realistic war planning grounded in world building. I haven't seen as many immediate reaction videos talking about this. Of course, I haven't seen the full-hour review by Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs yet, but because that just came out like a few hours ago. But these 2 points, the realistic low fantasy is what this subgenre is, that we are seeing the suffering of the commoners and realistic war logistics and economics, Aragorn's tax policy and stuff. These are things the novels are famous for, which Benioff and Weiss ignored as they went forward. Both of these come up in the scene where Aegon is hearing petitioners to the Iron Throne, because they're interrelated. War planning, economics, how it's hurting the small folk. So, Aegon with petitioners at the Iron Throne, and in terms of war planning, the Green Council. What really stands out for this is, I don't know if you remember this or if you're new here, and I'll link it. Both of these points were actually on the list I made before Season 1 began, of the top 10 fan questions. And that wasn't just an idle list. I took like 2 weeks polling my audience here through my community tab, what are your top questions going into this? And I made up a good 6 or 7, which most people asked anyway. Like, the top 2 questions, which I had, which a lot of other people had, were, how will you handle the unreliable narrator nature of the source material, and how will you handle time skips? Because those are the top 2 obvious things. Everyone, including me, was asking that. 2 questions I didn't think to add, but other people asked and went, oh, those are really good points, I should have asked that, which were in my top 10 list, go and check. People did ask in that list like 2 years ago, hey, are you actually going to show the suffering of the small folk and realistic war planning based on logistics? Because Game of Thrones increasingly ignored that. And here they are, both in this episode. What I mean is things like, the whole point that in the books that the commoners are suffering in the war, and it doesn't even matter to them why these lords are fighting each other. That even if their cause is just or unjust, and in many cases it's just petty feuds between nobles. I mean, Cersei does something really petty and stupid, and dozens to hundreds of commoners end up dying. That, oh, I don't care what's happening in the Riverlands, and like Salt Pans, this major town, is sacked and hundreds of people are dead. And it's just petty rivalries between the nobles, and the whole thing that Martin said, rulers ignore the suffering of the commoners at their peril. That these aren't even good reasons, moral reasons for a war, like Robb Stark and everything. And even then, a lot of the commoners are like, it doesn't affect us that Ned Stark got killed, you're just burning out our crops and everything. And more often than not, it isn't a good reason. Like, the Septon Maribald speech about broken men, which is one of the key things in the whole series from Feast for Crows, and which Cogman was proud that he changed instead of using verbatim when he easily could have in Game of Thrones, that they really ignored that was essential. They even acknowledged stupidly, oh yeah, we cut a lot of the scenes showing the suffering in the Riverlands, that That's why A Feast for Crows was so impactful. That subversion of, and good subversion of, no, at the end of in book 3, Robb Stark dies, and the Lannisters win, but it's a Pyrrhic victory. That, okay, you burned out the Riverlands. It'll take a generation for them to recover from this economically, much less anything else. What have you won? And that's what a lot of real wars were like the devastation of the 30 Years' War and other things. So all of that, just that petitioning scene where they have 3 petitioners, and the one who's a merchant who says, well, all of our salt is shipped overseas from Essos with the blockade in place. We won't have enough for winter. Oh, if that wasn't clear to you, remember this is a medieval civilization that they don't have refrigeration. They need salt to preserve food. Otherwise, it'll spoil long before winter. And they can't, you only keep alive your breeding stock. You need to slaughter the animals you don't have feed for, so it'll all just rot and go to waste. Or, so we're running out of salt for winter. Or, you want to order scorpion launchers. Okay, we don't have infinite logistics. They cost money. Iron prices are going up because of the blockade, and even then, it takes weeks to build a single one. I can't take other orders during that time. Could you pay us in advance? So the practical, logistical things of this were just really great. That they were acknowledging this. As for realistic war planning, well, this overlaps with so much you see with low fantasy logistical needs. That with the dragons, that Ryan Condal talked about this in an interview leading up to season 1 with History of Westeros, and now we see it, that he explained it pretty well, but they're taking 10% of sheep flocks to feed the dragons. And Otto says because they're more active. Condal explained in the interview, well, they're reptiles, that their metabolism is higher when they're doing more, so if you're flying them around a patrol all the time, they need to eat more. Which makes sense. It was explicitly said in the books, but he said we're using it to show off that these are a realistic war asset with measurable needs. That it is a fantasy creature, but the whole low fantasy thing, that it eats a measurable quantity of food, that they have needs, that this isn't like, like in Warcraft, World of Warcraft, where there's a creature that it's more of a construct made of living light that doesn't need to eat or drink water or have any needs, versus, okay, it's a war beast. With realistic, we know they have certain food requirements. And this is the exact opposite of the respawning Dothraki we got by the end of Game of Thrones, where it's winter, but no one is seemingly worried about food shortages despite burning out all the food stores, that the Dothraki are literally respawning. Oh, it's the end of the Dothraki. Just, okay, we need to take a tenth of the sheep, that the small folk then, and even if we do take them, then the small folk don't have enough to eat. All of that, and there's overlaps between the two scenes. Though, in terms of war planning, more briefly, I'm going to talk about this more again after episode 2 or 3 later videos on the realistic war planning of dragon warfare. Well, in the Green Council scene, all of the politics in general were great, but for this specific topic, they were clearly explaining, I hope, to a general audience, why aren't they just throwing dragons at everything? Well, by analogy to nuclear weapons, they're a deterrent. A better analogy is, it's like moving battleships around on a war map, or it's like moving the queen around in chess. That they're powerful, but they can only be in one place at a time. So moving your piece to a new location means you're leaving somewhere else exposed. That there's rational reasons they didn't just immediately have this battle royale between the 16 to 17 dragons that are out, that they couldn't. And mild spoilers right now, most of the war, most of their dragons are concentrated at their capitals in King's Landing and Dragonstone to deter attack by the other side. And every now and then they'll send out dragons to do other objectives, and they're worried about the other side responding. And that's why they're still using conventional armies. Again, the nuclear analogy, and even Kristen Cole, one of the more hawkish Greens, agrees when Allison says, Vhagar and Sunfire can't go from King's Landing to Harrenhal. We need them here as deterrence against Rhaenyra's dragons. More on that in later ones, but you see in the trailer Aemon saying, we can't just win with dragons, we need dragons behind armies of men. Because as we saw in the Dornish insurgency against Aegon the Conqueror, dragons, again, they're like nukes, they're like attack helicopter, they're like bombing someone where with napalm in Vietnam or something. Well, how could we not be winning? Well, we're fighting an insurgency. That you need men to hold territory. So those are the 7 major takeaways. Some really quick lightning round stuff, just notable things. The Velaryons don't really do much in that episode because it's focused on blood and cheese, but I'm not worried because we know from trailers and other advanced reviews that even within the first 4 episodes they actually have a lot to do. It's like Baela, Rhaena didn't really have that much. We briefly saw Alan of Hull with Corlys, but that wasn't the focus of this episode. And really this is pretty much what Game of Thrones did, that shift by the second season, that Season 1 was entirely about Ned Stark, but by seasons 2 or 3, you would alternate between storylines so that, like, you might have a Daenerys-heavy episode in episode 2.4, but then episode 2.5 might be a Daenerys-light episode. So they're alternating between storylines, so it's just, I'm fine, I'm not taking points off for that. If you're, the Velaryons didn't get a lot, well, judge it as a block of episodes. We know they're doing stuff coming ahead. So just getting used to that the format has shifted to alternating storylines because they're not all in one place. Season 1, it was pretty much everyone's in the Red Keep. So I get that they're just alternating. We found out Allison's mother's identity, which we didn't know in the books, that her name was Allery Florent, that she was a Florent. I always thought she was a red wine. Condell mentioned that in pre-season interviews, so I already made a video about it, so check out the Allery Florent video I made about Allison's mother, and the implications of that were actually really interesting. I loved the use of montage at Luke's funeral, and Condell said this, that even though Rhaenyra and Alicent are physically apart, we can use the techniques of cinema, like, editing and montage, to parallel their storylines and tie them in together. And Benioff and Weiss didn't use things like montage because they didn't know how cinema works. Because they'd never worked in television before, and it was a film school to them. So also I love that they're using montage. This is the first episode where they've mentioned the Greyjoys by name in the prequel. They haven't really mentioned them before. That pretty much from the books, in the Small Council, the Green Council is going, wow, we need a counter to the Velaryon fleet. Well, maybe we can switch Dalton Greyjoy to our side by offering him to be Master of Ships. I don't think Dalton Greyjoy is in this season, but they're setting him up in dialogue. He will be in later seasons. The Red Kraken, Dalton Greyjoy. He's a pretty big character. People are fond of him, so Dalton Greyjoy is coming. Another first mention in there is that clearly saying Otto's nephew Ormond is the current head of Lord of Old Town and head of House Hightower. Remember that Otto is the younger brother. We saw his older brother Hobart in the first half of season 1, but we haven't seen him since at the wedding. That was 16 years ago, so he's passed away in the intervening 16 years. Otto's nephew Ormond is the head of House Hightower, leading the main Hightower army. I'm pretty sure that when Uncle Gwaine comes from Old Town next episode, he's probably going to mention Daeron, but we'll judge that when it happens. But setting up Ormond now, and as others have noted, Myzaria's accent is toned down, which is good. I hate reducing it to just, the accent, but Sonoya Mizuno is a well-known veteran actor. She's been in a lot of high-profile projects. She's very skilled, and I thought they were reducing, the role became reduced to that because the accent was too heavy, that they dialed it back, and on top of that, it allowed her to really act without that distraction. And her actual performance felt really organic, that some people go, sometimes it feels like Shakespearean. She was like, let's just cut through the bullshit and not play games here. Yeah, I'd lie. Yeah, I'd profit from whatever. We're going to start threatening everyone. She's like, I'm not dealing with these tropes now, come on. Cut through the bullshit. So Myzaria was well done for the scenes she had in terms of the acting. They dialed it back, so that's just a lightning round of all the little things there. What were the highs and lows of the episode to me? Well, overall, the scenes I enjoyed the most were the long Green Council scene and then Aegon hearing petitioners at the Iron Throne. Like, put those back to back as one thing. I'm going to be watching clips of that on YouTube a lot, just on my phone. Those two scenes, which are connected, had everything we came for. Exposition, politics, characterization, Martin's signature brand of realistic storytelling. I mean, at the same time, we had both, in the same sequences, Aragorn's tax policy combined with gray character storytelling that Aegon is not this simplistic mustache-twirling villain. Within the same thing, that he's this flawed brat who's honestly trying but failing to be a good king. And they're talking about army movements while pointing at a map, and like they said in behind-the-scenes videos, we switched to having an upright vertical map because it was too hard for the camera to see a table map. That we want the audience to be able to see the map and see what we're doing as characters walk over to it and point at it. Which makes sense. It's like a World War II map. They said the World War II war maps would be on the wall so everyone could see it. The third best thing about the episode, if I had to rank them, and I don't like rank, is third simply because it's so short, is Emma Darcy's silent walk as we see Rhaenyra. They're walking to the war room from behind. It's all body language. Like I said, quality versus quantity. That was one scene of really amazing acting versus half of the episode where you're really getting to see Aegon as this flawed three-dimensional character, that there's love in him for his son. So the one scene for me is I love small council scenes, war planning and politics, and the characterization from it. So I like the council scene the best, but that's me. The lows. Well, as I said at the beginning, the relative, I don't consider it bad, but just relatively the weakest part of the episode was the prologue with Cragen Stark, which was actually pleasant for what it was. I'm going to make a longer video about this, that there were even points about it that I liked. That, oh, that is something clever they're doing there. It wasn't all, and this is the reaction I've seen even from Westeros.org, that this should have been a multi-episode story arc, and it was good for what was in it, but it should have been more, and I'll break that down in a full video. Still some interesting bits in it. Blood and Cheese, as I said, I didn't dislike it as a book fan. I loved the cinematography and acting. There were some minor changes I didn't really care about. I'm not going to rank it as a high because I'm not a psychopath. Like, oh, I love that child murder scene. No, it was a well-done scene. And there were some changes in the book, and I was fine with that. Separate video on that, too. So I'm making separate videos this week, right after this, on Cragen and the North in general, the 5 minutes we saw of it, and a little more on Blood and Cheese specifically. But of the advanced reviewers who saw the first 4 episodes in screeners, they said they ranked, most of them, like Voice of Old Town, ranked this 4th. So I thought this was a pretty solid opening, and many others said, no, the other episodes are even better than this. So I'm fine. That as an episode, you have the episode level things, and then what I call the macro level things of season scale issues, like the North should be in multiple episodes. Not a plot or even a B plot, but there was like a decent amount of material they could have covered there. And we're starting to hear rumors that they're doing other things. Like in the coming up next week trailer, you see Jace treating with the Freys at the Twins. Confirmed, and you see his dragon in it. So maybe they're playing around with that. I'm not really sure. Like, they did set up the Winter Wolves are coming. When the Starks are sending men. We'll see what happens with that. But this has been my analysis of this. And, in closing, starting with Season 2, I have set up a Patreon account. Simply because in the past year or so, people have kept asking me, can you set up a Patreon account? We'd like to donate you money that way. And I'm like, well, okay. I'm not really heavy into Patreon. The thing is, I don't believe in having private content. I want everyone to see it, or having an exclusive thing that only some people get to ask. So I set up 3 tiers, and I explain in it If you want to write in a question, I'll answer it as much as another question, and you'll get my attention. But I set it up just because some people said, "Can we donate money that way?" That's the way they donate money to YouTube channels more than other stuff, because I don't really do live streams for Super Chat. So fine, I'll see where that goes like a year from now. It's just I'm getting it started. Like if I get like $20 to $100 on that in the first couple of months, whatever. But I got the ball rolling on that because people kept asking. Otherwise, again, please like and subscribe. I'm sorry I'm behind schedule on all this. It's also like my plan was to sleep all day Sunday and then stay up all night reporting on everything, but like Sunday was the Father's Day weekend in the United States, so I was out doing stuff with my family. Then, because Blood and Cheese was a little different, I decided hold back and see what other channels are saying about this first. That I wanted to assess that. And I don't want to, I'm not in the habit of making immediate reaction videos that I turn off the episode, then make it. I like watching the behind-the-scenes videos and interviews first to get a sense of what the cast and crew were trying to do. So many spin-off videos, and while I'm here, by the way, we got our first production still for Dunk and Egg in full costume, and they announced the full set of characters. I need to do another video on Dunk and Egg, and on that Nymeria is not a dead project, they got a new writer. We live in interesting times, as the old Chinese curse says, but having too much content to report on, like I said months ago, and everything's going to get really fast as soon as Season 2 comes out. Having too much content to report on is a problem you want to have, compared to the 2-year gap we've been in, which we will never have that much of a gap between news again. So remember, please like and subscribe. I set up a Patreon if you want to do it that way. More content incoming as soon as I can.